All right, horror fans, brace yourselves. We're digging up 20 weird, creepy, and downright jaw-dropping facts about the original Night of the Living Dead, the 1968 indie flick that didn't just launch the zombie genre, it tore up every rulebook in horror. This wasn't your average monster movie, it was raw, bloody, and dangerous, both on screen and behind the scenes. From real guts to legal disasters, accidental gore, and decisions that shape pop culture for decades, this one's got it all. Let's go straight for the brain. Fact 1. They ate real organs on set. That infamous scene where zombies chow down on human remains? Yeah, those weren't props. The cast actually munched on real animal guts, mostly cow organs from a local butcher. It was a budget move. Fake prosthetics and special effects were too expensive, so Romero went practical and primal. The result was disgusting, visceral, and unforgettable. Some actors nearly vomited on set. Others just powered through, holding their breath and biting into slimy, cold liver under hot studio lights. And it got worse. They reused the same organs for multiple takes. That means by day 3 or 4, the meat had started to rot. The smell was overpowering, but in glorious black and white, the effect was perfect. No color needed, just texture, movement, and commitment. Romero later admitted it was a gamble, but one that paid off. That raw, uncomfortable realism became part of the movie's legend. And now, anytime you rewatch that scene, just remember, someone actually put that in their mouth.
Did you hear me when I told you they turned over our car?
Oh, hell, any good 5 men can do that.
Fact 2. It wasn't originally about zombies. The word zombie is never said once in Night of the Living Dead. Not by the characters, not in the script, not even in Romero's original concept. These creatures were referred to as ghouls, more like reanimated cannibals than the Walking Dead we think of today. Romero took inspiration from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, where vampire-like creatures stalk the ruins of humanity. But his twist was even darker. No fangs, no seduction, just relentless, mindless hunger. And once they bite you, you become one of them. The zombie rules we know today, headshots, infection, the slow shuffle, didn't exist before this film. Romero created them accidentally. Over time, fans and critics began calling these creatures zombies, and the name stuck. By the time Dawn of the Dead rolled around in 1978, Romero had leaned into the term. But in 1968, he wasn't trying to start a genre, he was just trying to make something terrifying. And he did. Fact 3. The budget was only $114,000. Most modern horror films spend more on craft services than Night of the Living Dead did on its entire production. The film's final budget? A shockingly low $114,000. Romero and his team had to scrape every dollar together. They even formed a company, Image 10, made up of 10 investors who each chipped in $600. Cast and crew wore multiple hats. Actors helped build sets. Crew members appeared on screen. Most people weren't paid up front, and some took deferred salaries that never came. The film stock was cheap. The equipment was borrowed. They edited it in a basement. But somehow, this ragtag team of Pittsburgh filmmakers created a masterpiece that grossed over $30 million worldwide. That's a return on investment of more than 250 times the cost. Even with the copyright mishap that cost them profits, Night of the Living Dead became one of the most profitable independent films ever made. Proof that passion, grit, and raw vision can still beat Hollywood glitz. Fact 4. Duane Jones rewrote his own dialogue. Duane Jones wasn't just groundbreaking because he was the first black lead in a mainstream horror film. He was groundbreaking because he brought intelligence, authority, and dignity to the role of Ben. And most of that came from him. The original script had Ben as more of a rugged trucker type, aggressive, blunt, maybe even a little crude. But Jones, a well-educated stage actor, found the dialogue lacking, so he rewrote much of it. He made Ben calm, strategic, and sharp. He pushed back on lines that felt unnatural. Romero agreed. He didn't cast Jones because of race, he simply gave the best audition. But once hired, Jones reshaped the character into a confident, commanding presence. It changed the entire tone of the film. Ben wasn't just a survivor, he became the moral center. And that choice made the ending all the more devastating. Fact 5. The ending was almost different. Originally, Ben was supposed to survive. He made it through the night, boarded up the house, fought off the ghouls, but during the final rewrite, Romero and Russo changed everything. They gave the film a final gut punch. Ben emerges from the basement alive, only to be shot in the head by a redneck posse who mistake him for a ghoul. The camera lingers. There's no music, just a brutal, silent end. And remember, this was 1968. The civil rights movement was raging. Just months earlier, Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. The image of a black man being shot and burned by a white mob hit like a hammer. Critics were stunned. Viewers walked out in shock. It wasn't just horror, it was a mirror. Romero later said the ending wasn't political, but he knew what it meant, and audiences have never forgotten it. Fact 6. The film fell into the public domain by accident. Here's a real horror story. Night of the Living Dead became one of the most influential movies in film history, and Romero barely made a dime from it. Why? Because of a simple, tragic, legal blunder. When the film was first released, its distributor changed the title card, replacing the original title Night of the Flesh Eaters with Night of the Living Dead. But when they swapped it out, they forgot to include a copyright notice. That mistake meant the film instantly fell into the public domain. Forever. Anyone could copy it, sell it, screen it, or put it on VHS without paying a penny. Romero didn't even know it had happened at first. By the time he realized, bootlegs were everywhere. And though the movie made millions, Romero and his team saw barely a fraction. It was one of the costliest mistakes in indie film history. And it became a cautionary tale for generations of filmmakers. Fact 7. The house was scheduled for demolition. That creepy, boarded-up farmhouse wasn't built for the movie. It was a real house in Evans City, Pennsylvania, and it was already set to be demolished. So when the production team got permission to film there, they went all in. They smashed windows, knocked down doors, and boarded up every entry. They didn't have to worry about preserving the set. They knew it would be rubble in a few weeks. That gave the film a gritty, lived-in realism you don't see in most horror sets. They didn't need to fake the decay. It was already there. And when it came time to burn bodies or create chaos, they could actually do it. Today, that house is long gone, but the location has become a pilgrimage site for horror fans. There's even a monument nearby for Romero and the film. The house may be dust, but its legacy lives on. Fact 8. The blood was chocolate syrup. Want to make blood on a budget? Use Bosco. That's what Romero did. Since the film was black and white, they didn't need red. They needed something dark, thick, and convincing. Enter chocolate syrup. It had the perfect consistency, showed up vividly on camera, and best of all, was cheap. But that doesn't mean it was pleasant. Imagine pouring sticky syrup on your face, your clothes, your hair, and then shooting for hours under hot lights. Actors got drenched. Clothes were ruined. Ants invaded the set. But it worked. The blood looked disturbingly real, especially during the infamous trowel scene in the basement. It's amazing what a little kitchen hack can do for horror history. And now, every time you eat a chocolate sundae, there's a chance you'll remember the taste of death. Fact 9. Most of the zombies were locals. Romero didn't have a budget for casting hundreds of extras, so he turned to the people around him, friends, neighbors, volunteers, even local merchants. All they had to do was show up in old clothes, shuffle toward the camera, and look hungry. Some did it for pizza. Others just wanted to be in a movie. The result? A ragtag, eerie collection of everyday folks turned flesh eaters. And honestly, that's what made it so effective. These weren't Hollywood monsters. They were regular people. Your mailman, your teacher, the guy who bags your groceries, all coming to eat you. It was haunting because it felt real. And when the credits rolled, many of those zombies went back to their day jobs, probably still reeking of chocolate syrup and cow guts. Fact 10. The film was inspired by a beer commercial. Believe it or not, the seed for Night of the Living Dead started with a beer ad. George Romero was working on a commercial for Iron City Beer in Pittsburgh, just a basic shoot of people relaxing and drinking in the sun. But he joked to his crew, "What if something weird crawled out of the ground?" That throwaway line stuck. Romero began thinking, what if the dead really did rise? What if civilization collapsed? From that offhand remark grew the idea of reanimated corpses, a farmhouse siege, and a world spiraling into chaos. It's wild to think the greatest horror film of its time started with a beer and a bad joke. But that's indie filmmaking at its best. You never know what idea will rise from the grave. Fact 11. It was banned in parts of Europe. When Night of the Living Dead hit theaters, it didn't just shock American audiences, it horrified entire countries. The film was so graphic, so unrelenting, and so bleak that it was outright banned or heavily censored in multiple parts of Europe. In Germany, for example, it was deemed too disturbing for public release, especially due to scenes involving children turning into killers and family members devouring each other. The UK put heavy restrictions on it too. Remember, this was 1968. Most horror films still had monsters played by guys in suits. This one had child murder, cannibalism, and hopeless endings. The British Board of Film Classification called it dangerously subversive. Audiences weren't prepared for that kind of raw, no-holds-barred storytelling, but in time, the very things that got it banned became what gave it cult status. It wasn't just shocking, it was revolutionary. And Europe eventually came around. Today, it's studied in film schools across the globe. But back then, it was considered a threat to public sanity. Fact 12. Judith O'Dea was traumatized by the shoot. Judith O'Dea, who played Barbara, wasn't your typical scream queen. She was a theater actress from Pittsburgh, not some hardened Hollywood star, and nothing could have prepared her for what Romero put her through. The freezing nights, the endless takes, the claustrophobic set, the emotional breakdown her character had to endure and stay in for hours at a time. O'Dea later admitted she was truly shaken by the experience. In several scenes, like when Barbara watches her brother get attacked or when she silently rocks back and forth in shock, she wasn't even acting. She was emotionally wrecked. Add to that the physical discomfort, cold air, sticky syrup, and screaming until your voice breaks, and it's no wonder she stepped away from film for a while afterward. To this day, she says the role haunted her, even decades later. It wasn't just playing Barbara, it was surviving her. Fact 13. It premiered in a theater known for smut films. You'd think a film that changed cinema history would premiere somewhere grand, right? Think again. Night of the Living Dead debuted at the Fulton Theater in Pittsburgh, a venue better known for late-night risque films and grindhouse double features, basically a sleazy theater with sticky floors and questionable patrons. But the strange thing is, it worked. The audience was rowdy, loud, and totally into it. Word of mouth spread quickly. College students, young couples, and rebellious teens packed the place. And then the newspapers started talking. Suddenly, what was supposed to be a cheap throwaway horror flick was getting real attention. The unlikely premiere location added to the legend. This wasn't polished studio horror. It was dirty, dangerous indie filmmaking. It was horror that snuck in the back door, took over the projector room, and demanded you pay attention, even if your shoes stuck to the floor. Fact 14. The little girl actually stabbed her mom. Okay, not for real, but that unforgettable scene where little Karen kills her mother in the basement with a trowel, that wasn't a special effect. That was Kira Shawn, the 11-year-old daughter of producer Carl Hardman, doing the stabbing motions herself. The trowel was retractable, and the stabbing sounds were added in post. But everything else? Real. The lighting, the camera angle, the slow, deliberate movements, all shot in eerie silence. Kira said she didn't fully grasp what she was doing at the time. She just followed direction. But the result? One of the most chilling murder scenes in horror history. A child killing her parent. No music, no dialogue, just the sound of a blade and a scream. The fact that Romero had the guts to film it that way and that a real child pulled it off is part of what made this film so unsettling and unforgettable. Fact 15. The news anchors were real reporters. One of Romero's smartest moves didn't involve blood or zombies. It involved believability. To sell the horror, he used real Pittsburgh TV and radio reporters as the newscasters in the film. These weren't actors pretending to deliver the news. They were actual broadcasters doing what they did every night on local stations. And it worked like magic. Their serious, familiar tones grounded the chaos in reality. When they told viewers to stay inside, it sounded exactly like a real emergency broadcast. The military footage, the emergency interviews, the chaos in Washington, all of it felt real because the voices were. It gave the audience a creeping sense that what they were watching wasn't fiction. And in 1968, during the height of the Cold War, Vietnam, and civil unrest, that realism hit hard. It blurred the line between screen and reality and helped make the horror feel unshakably authentic. Fact 16. The movie was blamed for corrupting youth. When Night of the Living Dead hit theaters in 1968, there was no MPAA rating system in place yet. That meant the film could, and did, screen at matinees attended by families and young kids expecting a fun monster flick. What they got instead? Flesh-eating ghouls, child-on-parent murder, and an ending so bleak it left some children in tears. Famous film critic Roger Ebert wrote a scathing review, not of the film, but of the system that allowed children to be exposed to such a brutal experience. Parents dragged their kids out of the theater mid-scream. Others stayed frozen in their seats, shocked. The media exploded with criticism, claiming the film had destroyed the innocence of horror. Suddenly, horror movies weren't just spooky. They could be nihilistic, violent, and socially charged. This backlash helped push for the creation of the modern film rating system we use today. Ironically, the controversy only made the movie more popular, because once you tell teens they shouldn't see something, you know they'll find a way. Fact 17. Romero used stock footage for budget filler. With barely enough money to finish the movie, George Romero turned to a creative trick that ended up working way better than expected. Stock footage. Tanks, fires, crowd shots, emergency response clips, all pulled from public archives and spliced into the film. It gave Night of the Living Dead the illusion of a massive nationwide crisis when, in reality, the entire story was shot in and around one rural house with a handful of actors. Romero masterfully cut between the quiet terror of the farmhouse and the large-scale chaos of cities on the brink, creating a sense of global panic. And it was cheap, the ultimate low-budget hack. What's more impressive is that the footage blends seamlessly. Audiences didn't realize they were watching newsreels and military B-roll. Instead, they bought into the illusion that the world was ending. Not just for Ben and Barbara, but for everyone. That's low-budget filmmaking at its most brilliant. Smoke, mirrors, and pure atmosphere. Fact 18. It sparked the entire zombie genre. Before Night of the Living Dead, the word zombie meant something very different, usually tied to Haitian folklore and voodoo. But Romero changed that forever. His ghouls were flesh-eating, shambling, mindless monsters who spread their condition by biting others. Sound familiar? That's because nearly every zombie movie, show, and game you've ever seen copied that blueprint. Dawn of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, Resident Evil. They all trace back to Romero's 1968 classic. It created the rules of zombie infection. Shoot them in the head, don't get bitten, and if you die, you come back. Even Romero himself kept evolving the mythos with his sequels. But make no mistake, without Night of the Living Dead, we wouldn't have zombies as we know them. It turned a $114,000 indie film into the genesis story for an entire subgenre. And it all started with a camera, some chocolate syrup, and a whole lot of guts. Fact 19. They used pig knuckles for flesh. If the gore in Night of the Living Dead looks a little too real, that's because some of it was. In addition to animal organs, Romero's team used pig knuckles to mimic human flesh, especially during scenes where ghouls are seen feasting on bodies. The bones, the fat, the muscle, it all read perfectly on black and white film. But it wasn't just about visuals. Those knuckles were slimy, smelly, and came with an odor that got worse the longer they sat under hot stage lights. Actors who played zombies had to pretend to love chewing them even when they were nearly gagging. Some spit them out off camera between takes, others just powered through it, but the effect was undeniable. Viewers at the time swore they were watching real people get ripped apart. It added to the raw, unfiltered horror that made this movie infamous. And to this day, no CGI has ever quite matched the sheer gross-out power of one sweaty actor gnawing on pig bones for art.
So afraid. I ran.
Fact 20. It was selected for the National Film Registry. Despite being shot on a shoestring budget, banned overseas, and nearly forgotten in its early years, Night of the Living Dead achieved something most films never will. It was selected for preservation by the Library of Congress. In 1999, it was officially added to the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That puts it in the same class as Citizen Kane, Casablanca, and Gone with the Wind. Not bad for a film that lost its copyright, had no major stars, and was filmed in a crumbling house outside Pittsburgh. The registry recognized what horror fans had known for decades, that this wasn't just a movie. It was a turning point, a raw, revolutionary moment in cinema that shattered conventions and created an entire genre from the ground up. Romero may have never gotten rich off it, but his legacy is etched in history, literally, because now Night of the Living Dead is preserved forever, and the dead will never rest. So there you have it, 20 disturbing, disgusting, and downright legendary facts about Night of the Living Dead. It wasn't just a horror movie, it was a game changer. A film that built a genre from the bones up, all with nothing but chocolate syrup, pig knuckles, and pure creativity. If you enjoyed this trip into horror history, smash that like button, subscribe for more behind-the-scenes madness, and remember, in the world of cult horror, the dead never really stay buried.